I am Arthur, 66 years old, a retired commercial logistics manager. I was sitting quietly on my back porch, watching the morning frost melt off the railing, when my phone rang. It was my daughter, Sarah. Her voice sounded tight, rehearsed. "Dad," she said, "the best Thanksgiving gift you could give me this year is simply not coming. Julian and I just need some space." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why or beg to see my only young grandchild. I just took a slow sip of my hot black coffee and said, "Of course, honey. Whatever you need." Then I slowly hung up. The autumn air was crisp and quiet. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of a lawnmower down the street. She thought she had successfully pushed me aside. She thought I was just another aging parent who would quietly accept being excluded from the holiday. I just stared blankly at the dark screen of my phone. What I didn't tell her was that I had already made 3 very important phone calls that morning. Phone calls that ensured she would remember this specific Thanksgiving for the rest of her life. I wasn't just going to stay home and watch football. I was going to set a perfect legal trap. To understand why I didn't fight for my seat at her table that day, you need to know about the boring, one-page document my son-in-law had handed me exactly 1 month earlier. My wife Martha and I have been happily married for 40 long years. We built our life slowly and carefully. The crown jewel of our quiet retirement is a 5-acre parcel of prime, commercial-zoned land on the edge of town. We bought it outright in 1989. I never developed it because I simply liked knowing I owned something completely free and clear. Land like that doesn't need explaining to people who understand what it truly means to owe nobody anything at all. Then there is Julian, Sarah's husband of 6 years. He is a smooth-talking financial broker who always wears expensive watches and drives a leased luxury sedan. He is incredibly charming in public, but privately, he has always been slightly condescending toward me. He frequently makes polite jokes about my old pickup truck and calls my carefully maintained property rustic. I usually just smiled and let it roll off my back, assuming it was just simple generational friction. Exactly 1 month before Thanksgiving, Julian came over on a Sunday afternoon. He brought a neat manila folder and a warm smile. "Arthur," he said smoothly, sliding the papers across my kitchen table, "it's just the annual property tax exemption and HOA dues authorization form. The county requires a fresh signature this year to keep your rates locked in." He tapped the signature line with a silver pen. It looked completely routine. Trusting my son-in-law completely, I signed the document without reading past the first paragraph. It was just boring administrative paperwork. I didn't think much of it until a few weeks later. Sarah came over for coffee, looking unusually stressed and deeply distracted. She mentioned offhand that Julian's brokerage had lost a massive commercial real estate deal. It left him suddenly facing $300,000 in unexpected debt and severe cash flow issues. She said it lightly, the way you mention bad weather, but I noticed her hands shaking slightly around her warm mug. I didn't ask more questions. You don't pry into your son-in-law's business unless you are explicitly invited to do so. I brushed the whole thing off, not wanting to cause any unnecessary family tension during the holidays. I just assumed he would figure it out like responsible adults always do. I didn't think about that tax form again until the day my local bank manager called me with a very strange question. The next Tuesday, I drove to my local bank to deposit a routine check. David, the branch manager who has handled my accounts for 15 years, greeted me warmly. But as he reviewed my file, his smile faded into mild confusion. He leaned over his desk and lowered his voice. "Arthur, I saw a new power of attorney filed for your primary account and land parcel. But the notary stamp is from Apex Corporate Closings downtown. They only handle massive commercial deals, not routine paperwork." It looked incredibly weird, so I flagged it. My blood instantly ran cold. I stared at him, my heart hammering. I had never signed a power of attorney in my entire life. I thanked David quietly, took my receipt, and walked straight out to my truck. My hands were shaking as I dialed my lawyer, Margaret. She has represented our family for 2 decades and never wastes time on pleasantries. I told her exactly what David said. She asked me to hold for 10 minutes. When she returned, her voice was sharp. "Arthur, pull up the county records," she instructed. There it was. A general durable power of attorney, naming Julian as the sole agent. It gave him the absolute legal right to sell my 5 acres and access my bank accounts. The filing date was exactly 3 weeks after I signed that boring tax form. Margaret pointed out the fatal flaw. The notary block at the very bottom was typed in a slightly different font size than the rest of the text. It was a sloppy mistake. Julian had taken my genuine signature from the tax form, scanned it, and digitally pasted it onto a completely forged power of attorney. He thought he was clever. He thought a busy county clerk and a distracted bank teller would never notice a minor formatting discrepancy. But he underestimated a bank manager who knew my paperwork, and a lawyer who knew how to read a document. The shift in my chest was profound. The confusion evaporated, replaced by cold certainty. My son-in-law was not just in debt, he was actively trying to steal my legacy. I hung up and sat in the quiet cab of my truck. The engine was off, and the autumn wind rattled dry leaves against the windshield. I looked at my hands resting on the steering wheel. They were perfectly steady now. The shock was gone. The sadness was gone. All that remained was a sharp, methodical focus. I didn't call Julian. I didn't call Sarah. I just sat in my truck and made a quiet decision. If they wanted a transaction, I was going to give them one. Margaret and I moved with ruthless efficiency. Within 2 hours of our phone call, she had filed an immediate fraud alert with the county clerk against my 5-acre parcel. She also filed a formal, notarized revocation of the forged power of attorney, ensuring it was legally dead in the water before Julian could even blink. But she simply didn't stop there. Margaret called the State Real Estate Commission directly that afternoon. She reported a licensed real estate broker for attempting to secretly execute a deed transfer under a completely fraudulently obtained legal document. The legal trap was officially being built, brick by legal brick, leaving absolutely no room for him to escape his own greedy actions. The hardest part of those next 3 long days was the sheer agony of pretending everything was normal. I had to sit across from Martha at dinner, eating my food, while secretly planning my son-in-law's professional destruction. On Wednesday evening, I called Sarah to confirm I wouldn't be coming for Thanksgiving. Her voice sounded very tight. She sounded incredibly relieved and happy. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered. "Julian is just so stressed about work right now. We just need a quiet, peaceful holiday." Listening to her, my heart broke a little. She genuinely thought her husband was just overwhelmed by his lost business deal and wanted some space. She was protecting him, completely blind to the fact that he was actively trying to steal her father's legacy. I swallowed my anger and told her I understood, playing the exact part of the excluded, aging father perfectly. That night, I called my best friend, Sam. We have known each other since 1993. "Sam," I said, my voice completely steady. "Drive me to Sarah's house on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Don't ask any questions. Just bring your phone, keep it in your jacket pocket, and record absolutely everything that happens in that living room." Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he simply said, "I'll be there at 9:30. We will get this done right, Walt. I am bringing the good coffee, too." Thanksgiving morning arrived. The sky was gray, the air was cold, and at exactly 9:45 a.m., Sam and I pulled into the driveway. Sam and I walked through the front door without knocking. The rich smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon filled the hallway. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron. Her eyes went wide with genuine shock. "Dad," she said, her voice tight and confused. "I told you we needed space today. What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Julian walked in from the living room. He was wearing a thick cable-knit sweater and a perfectly practiced, fake smile. "Arthur, hey," he said smoothly, stepping forward. "We really didn't expect you. This is a bit awkward." I ignored his pleasantries. I didn't take off my coat. I just looked past him toward the closed dining room door, where a faint murmur of voices could be heard. "Julian," I said, my voice perfectly level and ice cold. "There is a notary sitting in your dining room right now, isn't there? She is here to notarize the deed transfer on my 5 acres, executed under a power of attorney I never knowingly signed." Julian's fake smile instantly vanished. His face dropped, the color draining from his cheeks in real time. The dining room door creaked open slightly, and a woman in a sharp blazer peeked out, looking incredibly nervous and clutching a leather folder tightly against her chest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I calmly laid out every single fact, my voice steady and completely devoid of anger. I told him about the forged power of attorney. I pointed out the sloppy, mismatched font size on the notary block at the bottom. I informed him that I had already filed a formal fraud alert on the deed with the county clerk that very morning. Finally, I told him that the State Real Estate Commission was already actively investigating a licensed broker for executing a fraudulent transfer. Julian panicked, his carefully constructed facade crumbling instantly. He tried to BS his way out of the corner he had painted himself into. "Arthur, listen, it was just a temporary restructuring to cover my sudden cash flow issues," he stammered, his hands gesturing wildly. "I was going to put the land back. It was just a short-term fix." I stared at him, my expression completely blank. "That is a very generous word for what my lawyer calls forgery and the financial exploitation of an elderly adult," I said quietly. Sarah stood frozen in the hallway, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Julian, then at the nervous notary in the doorway, and finally at me. The realization washed over her pale face, breaking her heart in real time as she finally saw the truth. Without saying a word to her husband, she walked over to the dining room, looked the notary in the eye, and quietly told her to leave the property immediately. Julian stopped talking completely. The silence in that living room was heavier than any shouting match. The legal fallout took exactly 8 long months. Julian was formally charged with forgery and attempted financial exploitation. To avoid actual prison time, he surrendered his real estate license before the commission could revoke it, accepted 3 years of strict probation, and paid $20,000 in restitution to cover my legal fees. It was a quiet, humiliating end to his grand scheme. Sarah separated from him in early March. The divorce was finalized quietly by August. She moved into a small, cozy apartment just a few miles from our house. As for my 5 acres on Independence Boulevard, I finally sold it that following summer on my own terms to a local developer for $950,000. The money was nice, but the peace of mind was priceless. Exactly 1 year later, Thanksgiving arrived again. This time, Sarah was sitting right here at my house. Martha was in the kitchen baking her famous bourbon pecan pie, filling the air with the sweet smell of cinnamon and sugar. My best friend Sam showed up around 4 in the afternoon, carrying a bottle of expensive wine he refused to name. We sat around the dining table, laughing and sharing stories, completely at ease. There were no notaries scheduled anywhere on anybody's calendar that day. The heavy tension of the previous year had completely melted away into the crisp autumn air. Midway through dessert, Martha looked at me and smiled warmly. "You know, for a man who always claims he is calm under pressure," she teased gently, "you sure went completely quiet for 5 whole minutes when you first found out about the forged documents." I just smiled back at her, taking a slow sip of my hot coffee. "I was not being quiet, Martha," I replied softly. "I was just doing the math." Sam laughed so hard he nearly dropped his plate. "Here is what I truly learned from all of this painful experience. Family is not just about blood, it is about who respects your boundaries and values your presence. If someone treats your hard-earned trust like a legal loophole, let them go without looking back. Protect what you have built over a lifetime. Sometimes, the loudest form of justice is saying absolutely nothing until you have all the facts. My name is Arthur. And my chair at the table is exactly where it belongs. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Heirloom Tales. What would you have done in my shoes? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one of your thoughtful replies. Stay safe, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next story. Friends, thank you.